the best mental shift that I know is just to take the charge out of nervousness. And instead of saying I'm really nervous right now or I'm really excited right now, it's like I'm feeling adrenaline. So when we enter express mode, we just speak for the sake of sharing an idea, and we're not so worried about how we look. We're worried about, am I getting the thing inside across? And so the game then becomes not how do I speak better, it's how do I feel more flow. I think I could break a formula for speaking into three. Yeah. A formula for speaking. Here we go.
I am here with a friend and very special guest that I've been looking forward to talking with for a long, long time. We are here with Michael Gendler, who is the co-founder of Ultraspeaking, a company and a course that I'm going to be telling you a lot more about. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So for someone just hearing about Ultraspeaking, they've never heard that before. What is your kind of your introduction to what that is?
As a verb, Ultraspeaking is the ability to feel comfortable, being natural, feeling at ease, speaking, especially in front of people, but it could also be on camera. It's like wherever you feel pressure, if you can find a way to feel like yourself, that to me is Ultraspeaking.
When you say public speaking, you're not just referring to like a big crowd at a conference or some professional setting. It's your definition is kind of wider than that.
Yeah, I mean, the question, like, what's the difference between speaking and public speaking is a hypothetical one or a philosophical one, because I think the philosophy of Ultraspeaking is there is no difference.
Okay.
Or rather, the difference is in our mind. And so when we see something as public speaking, it doesn't matter if it's a stage or if it's on camera or if it's an important interview or presentation, we magnify the stakes, we magnify the pressure, and we turn that into something important. And because it's important, we now treat it a certain way. So we try to live up to what we think we should do in that environment. What we've noticed is that the people who thrive in the interview or on camera or whatever, they actually have a naturalness to them. Yeah. They're kind of really good at being themselves. Yeah. And so that's because they're treating public speaking kind of just like speaking.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've noticed this too. It's like someone will be so confident and articulate and compelling, say in a meeting.
Yeah.
Which is really quite a high stakes situation. In some ways, even higher stakes than, giving a presentation to a crowd that is just, listening. But then if you say, oh, you are good at speaking, or do you want to come speak at my conference or my summit or even my meetup? They'll go, oh no, I don't do public speaking. No, that's not me. But they just did it. So in their mind, you're right, they're creating this like huge gap. Yeah. Why do you think that is? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it tracks to, in like the 40s and 50s, we were in the suit and tie era and the Toastmasters era, which is very performative speaking. You want to look the part of a public speaker. When someone says, I want to do a TED Talk, they have an image in their mind of what that looks like. And usually we get a lot of questions of like, what should I do with my hands? How should I stand? It's a very performative art. I think what's interesting about today is we've never been more in the age of authenticity, the age of Brene Brown and Jennifer Lawrence and Ryan Trahan and all these people, the Gary Vaynerchuks, who are just freestyling their way through life and being very uniquely themselves.
I want to recognize all of the women who have stood up for adversity, to adversity, not for it, to adversity.
The people who trust that part of themselves will look at the keynote and be like, cool, I'm going to show up and do my thing. The people who don't have that experience of doing the keynote over and over, they're going to think of the TED Talk. They're going to think of the Toastmasters speech, of the suit and tie model that has been shaped for us. And they're going to go, oh, I don't know how to be that. And so there's this perception that they have to be something in order to deserve that stage. In reality, we've seen that like the most compelling communicators tend to have these characteristics of vulnerability, authenticity, conversational speaking, all the things that are very much intuitive and innate. So the question is, how do you unlock that part of you in a scenario that had so much pressure and so much nervousness? If you're able to do that, then there really is a naturalness to the whole process.
So in your mind, sort of the thread that links together these various scenarios is, as you said, pressure. There's some sort of stake.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, and it's different for everyone. Like some people say, oh, my boss is in the room, so I have a tough time presenting. Or someone will say, oh, I can do it when my boss is in the room, but I can't do it when my direct reports are in the room because they know me and there's a lot of pressure there. Some people are like, I can work is fine, but if I'm at a barbecue with friends, but really I don't know the friends very well and they have friends that are strangers to me, that's when I clam up and I shut down. Some people are supernatural with everyone except a camera because the camera feels like, oh, it's weird, I'm talking to a thing. Pressure is whatever, it's always different. It's always unique to the circumstance, but what's in common is the same sort of mindsets or shifts that happen, and people start to treat pressure as this enemy. And we know that like the best in the world at any skill or at any sport also feel pressure, but they use that pressure to their advantage. And so I'm really fascinated by how do you use speaking pressure also to your advantage.
What are those mindset shifts? What are some that you find are most, I don't know, most common or most impactful, or that you kind of look for?
Yeah, one of them, everybody says, like, don't tell yourself you're nervous, tell yourself you're excited. And I really don't like that advice because it's dishonest. It doesn't work. Like, you can try to trick yourself and say, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited. But the reality is you're nervous. And by telling yourself you're excited, your brain is too smart, your body is too smart, like you won't believe yourself. And so it's this kind of mental trick that might work for some people, but it's not a long-lasting thing. The best mental shift that I know is just to take the charge out of nervousness, and instead of saying I'm really nervous right now or I'm really excited right now, it's like I'm feeling adrenaline. And that helps us remember that this is normal. If you didn't feel adrenaline, this wouldn't matter to you. If it didn't matter to you, life would feel very bland. And so embracing the physiological symptoms of nervousness, which we just call adrenaline, probably the most important mindset shift, because if you're focused on, oh, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, I'm nervous, you're just magnifying the nervousness and it's suddenly seen as a big threat.
What else? What are some other key shifts that you see people make?
I think the most useful shift, this one takes a little longer to develop, but the most useful shift in speaking is to go from impress mode to express mode. Everybody wants to impress while they're speaking. The pressure is the pressure to be impressive. And so we become performative as if we're trying to add value and we're trying to look a certain way. And so we enter impress mode. And that mode is really dangerous because the foundation of that mode is through the eyes of other people. Success is measured through something we can't control. So that's a very shaky foundation. Express mode I really like because express is basically like what you do with a therapist or what you do with a close friend. It's just like I'm speaking as a vehicle to express my thoughts, to share what I have inside in a mindset of I'm not being judged right now. And when we express, our heart comes through. When our heart comes through, people tend to be more receptive, especially in the age of authenticity. So when we enter express mode, we just speak for the sake of sharing an idea, and we're not so worried about how we look. We're worried about, am I getting the thing inside across? And the fastest way that people can level up their speaking is to enter this mode, because I find that like whoever's speaking from a mode of I just want to express myself ends up being impressive because you're surprised at how open and honest and authentic they come across as. So most people go the traditional route of I want to get good at speaking so that I can be impressive, and then I'll feel safe enough in order to really let my guards down and be a little bit messier. I'm saying, what if we reverse the cycle? What if we started giving ourselves the safety and permission to be a little bit messier in our speaking? We'll actually get the goal of being impressive as a side effect.
How do you provoke these mindset shifts in people? Like, let's say they're in your program or you're teaching or you're playing one of these games. What is it actually that has them go from this mode to that mode?
Yeah. Speaking is a flow-oriented process. Speaking is something that you do best when you're not thinking about it. We say the enemy of speaking is thinking about speaking. It's like, how am I coming across? What should I say next? What did I just, it's like this inner critic that's constantly monitoring what we're saying. Flow is the absence of that. It's like this beautiful, pure state where you're just kind of channeling and you're speaking. You don't even know how the words are coming across, but you're just able to do it. So in order to unlock somebody's speaking voice, we have to put them in a state of flow, which really means we have to put them in a state of trust, of non-judgment, of the absence of the inner critic. So we have all these different games and speaking exercises that get you to bypass the thinking brain so that you can experience what it's like to speak from a flow state. Once you're able to do that, the only missing ingredient is validation. You have to believe that this sort of like intuitive, kind of messy flow state style of speaking actually resonates with people. Because if you don't believe that, you're going to think, oh, that was messy, it wasn't valuable.
Or it's like selfish or indulgent. I may enjoy it, but it's not.
Yeah, exactly. We find that like if you enjoy your own speaking, other people are going to as well. If you don't enjoy your own speaking, that's a real compass of like, maybe that's the problem. So if you can get people to enjoy speaking by putting them in a flow state and then practicing in small groups so that they can get that feedback, that validation of like, wow, I really liked how you expressed this. The thing that's going to happen is they're going to go, oh, I don't even know how I did that. And that's the aha moment of like, wow, there's something that I know how to do naturally that I don't know how I'm doing it. And so the game then becomes not how do I speak better, it's how do I feel more flow.
Speaking as a form of creative expression. So, as I'm sure you know, I have this book, Building a Second Brain. It's about what I think of as the creative process, which I've kind of distilled down. Like my framework for the creative process is code. Capture, organize, distill, express. Express, the fourth and final step is the most important. That's what it's all leading up to. That's the whole reason to be creative in the first place, is to have that final, whether it's whatever form of output or expression it is. For some reason, probably because I'm a writer, most of the time that we talk about code and expression, we're talking about writing. That's sort of the default. And at one point I thought, reading and writing, that's the most universal form of expression that exists, right? Because almost everyone in modern times can read and write. But then I realized at one point, no, that's not the most universal. It's speaking. Speaking is far more universal, far more ancient, far more common. I mean, all day long, for most of us, we're speaking. So I'm curious, it's funny because my approach to creativity is pretty, kind of your approach to that competition, pretty kind of mechanical, framework-driven, left brain. We're talking about breaking up creativity into 4 separate stages. If someone who is probably the typical person who reads my books and watches these videos is left-brained, is analytical, and doesn't necessarily want to leave that behind completely, is there a way to do both?
I think I could break a formula for speaking into 3. Yeah. A formula for speaking. Here we go. I think this is how it works. So there's 3 phases. Step 1, speak before you think. Step 2, pause and breathe. Step 3, end strong. Step 1, use the part of your brain that is not in control. Dive in. You have to dive into speaking before you overthink it, because for most people, unless they're fantastic speakers, the problem with thinking before speaking is it leads to overthinking before speaking, which leads to hesitation, which leads to doubt, which leads to lack of confidence, which comes through. So speak before you think is really a philosophy of just start speaking, because it doesn't matter how you start. What matters is how you navigate along the way. And the ability to start speaking without fully knowing exactly what you want to say is going to be the biggest challenge for the person who's more analytical, who wants to be very scientific about it. But if you don't have that skill, you're missing a critical part of speaking, because speaking is intuitively messy. It's inherently unstructured. If you really think about what speaking is, it's super weird, because it's trying to communicate a sensation that you have within or an image that you sort of see and you're trying to on the fly express it, but you don't have the words planned out. Like there's no way you can do that. It's not a scalable process. So you have to get comfortable with spontaneity, with not seeing the full picture. And that's why the skill of speak before you think is really just the skill of trust yourself without knowing exactly where you're going.
This is so important. I want to kind of unpack this a bit. I think this pitfall is especially relevant to my audience. In a way, I almost wonder if my writing and my work has reinforced the tendency to overthink, over-prepare, over-plan, over-organize, because I do sometimes see people spending hours, days, weeks engineering the perfect whatever it is, which does make a little more sense with writing, right? Because you do need some kind of notes and different things. But what you were saying it brought me back to a couple of moments when I had to learn these lessons. Like certain ideas that I was introduced to, like one idea was that, I think, is this a Maya Angelou quote? Like people, I think you've quoted this before, like people remember how you made them feel, not what you said necessarily. And I remember sitting with this idea. I was like, what if the content of my words doesn't matter? And it was so offensive to me, that idea, because I put so much thought into accuracy and saying everything correctly and it making sense. But I remember hearing that idea and almost experimenting with it, like going about my day-to-day life. What if they were always just getting sort of this impulse that was my emotion?
Yeah.
And I found my communication was so much more effective. So much more effective.
Yeah, well, Nick Milo talks about this, the gardener and the architect. He basically talks about how do you get unstuck from creativity, especially in writing. There's two modes. There's either the like freestyler mode, which is basically like flow writing, and then there's the editor mode or the organizer. That's the two modes of speaking as well. You either are thinking and structuring, or you're freestyling. You're kind of being in the messy part. If you're always in the editor mode, that's going to be a block to the blank sheet of paper. Sometimes you just need to get the bad ideas out to get the momentum flowing. But if you're just going to freestyle the whole thing, it probably won't be as sharp as if you had a layer of editing. So it is a dance. And I think in speaking, most people really want to just have the frameworks and give me the structure and the recipe. But in reality, speaking is so inherently improvisational that you need to learn the ability to creatively improvise. And when you have both, you can be both free and self-expressed and improvisational, and clear, concise, structured, and well-versed, if you're able to keep both in balance.
That's I think the key. One of those modes is not inherently better or worse. They complement each other. You can go back. You have to go back and forth, right? And I've noticed that a couple of things. Smart people, especially, this is a pitfall, because they want to be in, let's call it the analytical mode, and say everything correctly and in the right order. Is it knowing which mode to be in any given situation? Is it the ability to move back and forth between them? Like, how do you hold these two modes?
That's the formula. So step one is speak before you think. Get comfortable with being messy and just starting to speak without knowing exactly where you're going. Step two is pause and breathe. An entire book can be written on this one step. Pause and breathe is essentially saying, when you feel like you are losing momentum, or you're starting to ramble, or you feel like you're going on a tangent, stop speaking and take a real full inhale and exhale. It's kind of synonymous with think. So speak, don't speak.
Oh, yeah.
Speak, don't speak. That's all speaking is. It's a process of speaking and not speaking. This, like, I can't stress this enough. This sounds super obvious. Like, okay, speak, pause, speak, pause, speak, pause. When you put somebody on the spot, under pressure, and you watch them speak, they don't pause. Because the adrenaline, the nervousness, it gives us a speaking sometimes feels like a rush. It's a literal rush. People rush through. The anxiety makes us, and as soon as we feel like we're running out of a thought, the fear of blanking in front of others is so strong that we start putting even more words out so that we mask the blanking. And so this idea of like, wait, pause, zoom out. Where do you want to go next? That skill is so intuitive, but it's so hard for people to do because it's not built into our nervous system.
Yeah.
To answer your question, you know, left brain, right brain, left brain, right brain, it's like speak before you know where you're going. Okay, when that's running out of steam, take a breath, re-navigate. Oh, I want to go there next. Okay, start speaking before it's fully clear. You kind of have a sense of where you want to go. When you start losing it, okay, pop out, pause, breathe. And so you keep doing this cycle all the way through until you get to the end. And that's step 3, which is end strong, which means end with confidence. People remember the end of experiences more than the beginning of experiences. So no matter how this messy process went, carry your confidence through the finish line, because people are going to be left with that feeling, that Maya Angelou quote. So make sure you don't lose confidence at the end because you're starting to second guess yourself. Carry your confidence through the finish line, and you have this 3-step formula for speaking.
I want to talk more about this second principle. I think it's so underrated. It's so underrated. And I remember a story about this. I teach, or until last year, taught these cohorts as well. And I started noticing, you know, I'm looking over here because I have my desk set up, which has multiple cameras, multiple screens, overhead camera over here, has a little stream deck, all these buttons. And I'm dealing with a lot of stuff, a lot of controls, mostly because I was doing it all myself, or maybe with one other person for the longest time. And I would start to pause merely because I had to deal with something. I'd be talking and I would just stop and be fiddling over here. And then later the feedback would be that those dramatic pauses were so effective. And I was like, what dramatic pauses? I was just fiddling over here.
Wow. There's this idea of pausing as punctuation.
Yes. Yes.
You want to emphasize a point, say nothing afterwards. Yeah. I think there's also a bigger theme for my life, which is I feel speaking is such a great metaphor for living. You can find so many life, I mean, people say it about like martial arts, they say it about whatever the craft is, like, wow, chess teaches me so much about life. Speaking teaches me a lot about life. What I find the most interesting is that people who are anxious in speaking tend to be anxious in life. People who don't pause in speaking tend to avoid pausing in their life, like real pausing in their days, in their schedules. People who have a small range in their speaking, who are more monotonous or who are kind of constricted, their life reflects that. So this beautiful thing starts to happen when you expand somebody's range, when they start to feel more expressed and more courageous. That translates into how they show up in their life. Their life starts to reflect that. When they learn to pause in speaking and truly be okay with silence, that starts to seep into life as well. So I'm always, whenever I think about like what is a framework for speaking, like let's even analyze this 3-step formula. Really, at a life level, it's like trust yourself and just go. But also take some space and evaluate where you've gone and where you want to go next. And no matter where you end up, make sure you finish with some confidence, you know, like own the journey. Don't just lose steam at the end. So I really want to stress test any ultra speaking philosophy around life. If it contradicts life, then I don't think it's sound. We probably haven't found something deep enough yet. But when it feels like it's intuitive to how Eastern philosophy and how all the great thinkers of humanity have really put their heads down, if it starts to synergize with that, then I feel like, okay, there's probably something substantial here.
Interesting. Let's talk more about that third principle.
End strong.
End strong. I can see the importance of that, say, in a keynote or TED Talk style presentation, but how would you apply that like in a meeting or with a small group of colleagues? How do you end that strong?
They did this research study where they put freestyle rappers into an MRI to study their brain activity. And they found that when the freestyle rappers would start freestyling, the prefrontal cortex would shut down and there'd be no activity, which makes sense because they're in flow. So there's not analyzing, they're not judging what they're saying, and they're just flowing. What was fascinating is that every freestyle rapper, as it was time to wrap up, no pun intended, as it was time to end their freestyle, the last 2 bars, suddenly the prefrontal cortex lights up. All this activity. And it makes sense. The ending's the hardest part. Not only are you thinking, how do I land this plane? But you're also thinking, did that make sense? Like, I need it to rhyme. I got to make sure it right. Like, there's a lot of decision making that happens at the end. So that's a really important idea, because what happens in speaking, if you ever watch, like, just look at people speaking in meetings, what you're going to notice, if they're not trained, if they don't really practice their speaking, most of them will speak normally. And then right at the very end, as they're figuring out, oh no, I got to wrap up this thing, you're going to start to see their confidence shrink. They might say something like, and I guess that's all I really have to say. And you'll hear it in their voice. You'll hear it in you'll see it, their shoulders kind of drop. They'll literally shrink toward the end. The reason that's happening is because as it's time to wrap up, the thinking brain activates. And the thinking brain is synonymous with also the critical brain. So not only are you thinking how to end, a voice pops up that says, did any of that just make sense? So you're already starting to second guess yourself before you've even started speaking. So it's not that you need to end strong. It's that you need to stop ending weak. And people don't realize they're doing it. They don't realize that they're and I guess it's just like it's a blind spot. Yeah. So what ending strong really means is say your final words with confidence. And for most people, that means with extra confidence, because you have to undo the doubt that you're feeling within, which is very natural and normal. So one of the ways to practice ending strong is to use the newscaster technique. If you ever watch a newscaster deliver the final ending of the newscast, they'll always say, and that's all for the 6 o'clock news. We'll see you next time. And it sounds like an ending. Yeah. And what they're doing is they're going up, down. They're going, and that's all for the 6 o'clock news. Thanks so much. And it feels like an ending because it's like in music, da-da-da, da-da. And that melodic up-down tends to be a technique to really punch home that final phrase. But the larger principle is just like, your speaking doesn't end when you finish speaking. Your speaking lasts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds after you finish speaking, which means stay in it. Continue to carry that confidence, continue to look the part. Like, the temptation is going to be to judge yourself very harshly and to have your insecurities all arise at the end. The practice of ending strong is, nope, stay in it. Carry your confidence through the finish line. It's kind of like a gymnast who lands the pose and puts the arms out to really signal to the judges, like, that's it. It's that final feeling of no matter how it went, even if you stumbled in your routine, stick the landing, hold the pose, and just carry that confidence through. And you'll find that what that trains your brain to do is to undo the habit of second guessing. It's to stop listening to that inner critic at the end and to just learn to put it aside and just keep your concentration on the confident part of yourself. I think one tool that really helps with ending strong is called a summary prompt, which is most important in meetings. When you're presenting something or you just went on a monologue and it's starting to sound like a tangent, a summary prompt is just a single sentence that helps you wrap up.
Like what?
Bottom line. Or, so in summary, the point I'm trying to make is this. So to conclude, and then your brain gets this instruction of like, oh, you just said, so to conclude, now it's my job to synthesize everything. So when people use summary prompts, it's a really strong way to land the plane because it's very directional. It not only do you end with something concrete, you end with the message. Yeah. And when you do that, it's super valuable because you just helped people extract the main idea of whatever tangent you were on. So if I were to do it right now, I'd say, so the point I'm making is, a summary prompt's a really effective way to end strong. And then you hold the pose. And inside you could be freaking out like, oh my God. But people can't really tell your nervousness as much as you feel it. And so it's a good practice to train confidence by staying in character, remaining composed, and not letting your internal anxiety affect your performance.
Michael, thank you. How can people find out more about you and your work, and even maybe get a firsthand experience of Ultraspeaking?
Go to ultraspeaking.com. We have a course called the Fundamentals course. It's a 30-day course. You learn how to speak before you think, musicality, pausing and breathing. We have a storytelling week. It's really the crash course on how to unlock the confidence within you. It's also a course on how to overcome anxiety. So if you have speaking anxiety, that would be the course to take. That's on ultraspeaking.com. But also just like play some of the games. They're all free. You create a free account. You get access to all these games that train the sub skills of speaking. And you'll be able to see for yourself what it's like to experience flow.
Incredible. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.